You and Bruce were best friends, yet you live 2,200 miles apart. How did that come about?
Well, in 1988, Diana and I had booked our first trip ever to go out west. I mean, we had never really traveled extensively up to that point, and so we were going to make this big, long trip. We were going to fly into San Diego, and we were going to drive, up the coast and out to Albuquerque and Phoenix and do all these things. And I was telling a work friend of mine about this trip, and she mentioned that she had a buddy in San Diego, and so this was a guy. This was Bruce. And she got to know him when she made her first trip out with a bunch of girlfriends, and they had a problem with their rental car, and Bruce helped them out of a jam. He actually let them borrow his parents' car, and they became friends. And from that point on, Bruce would always check in with Mary. He'd call her from time to time. And so I worked with Mary, and that's how this all came about. So anyway, this was kind of pre-Google, so there wasn't a way that you could really learn much about a destination you were going to. And so she's like, well, how about the next time he calls in, how about if I have him transfer over and talk to you? And I was like, that'd be great. So one day, the next time I heard her talking to him, and she's like, hey, Steve, I'm going to transfer Bruce over to you. And then so she transferred over, and I picked up the phone, and I heard this loud voice, and it's like, hey, Steve-O! And I knew right away we were going to be friends, because he was just so cool and casual, and it's like nobody really ever called me Steve-O, but he called me Steve-O right off the bat. And so we made plans to catch up, and even though he'd never met us before, he met us at the airport. He took time off work. He drove us to our hotel to make sure we got checked in. He took a couple other days off work to kind of run us around, show us different things. And then he even had us over to his apartment for dinner one night. And I don't remember what we had for dinner that night, but what I do remember was the funniest part was he got so engrossed in conversation about who knows what. It could have been politics, it could have been antique cars, I don't know. But he burned the garlic bread. And when I say he burned the garlic bread, he burned it up. I mean, it was black. And Diana and I thought it was hilarious, but not Bruce. He was so pissed at himself. And so we had to kind of talk him off the ledge that evening. But it was a great night, and it was a great kind of first time meeting him, and the rest is history.
What would you say were Bruce's best qualities?
Well, I'd say the three that come to mind immediately are like humility. He was a guy that never wanted to really talk about himself. He wanted to know about you, and he wanted to know how you were feeling, how you were doing, how work was going. He just didn't, he wasn't in it to talk about himself. He was incredibly loyal. He became my best friend, and I knew I could count on him for anything, anytime, anywhere. Just unbelievably loyal guy. And his generosity, I think, is probably the thing that I will always remember the most.
Tell me something that people would not know about your friendship with Bruce.
So, some people probably would know this, but I was the best man in Bruce's wedding. Diana and I went out to Medford, Oregon, when he got married, and we were all biting our nails right up until the ceremony because it was pouring down rain, and it was incredibly hot as well. But he ended up getting him married in the middle of a redwood forest, and it could not have been a better day. It was just an unbelievably beautiful day. Another thing is that over the years, Diane and I took more than 20 vacations with Bruce, even though we did live 2,200 miles apart. I mean, we went skiing, we went hiking, we went wine tasting, you name it, we did it. And he's the only person other than Diana that I vacationed with in all three countries in North America. So U.S., Canada, Mexico, we did all of it. And he's also the only other person that I've traveled with where we each ended up checking the other one into the hospital at some point in time during our vacation.
You mentioned that one of Bruce's best qualities was generosity. Can you give me a couple of examples?
Oh, there were a lot of examples, but I would say the biggest thing was that Bruce used his talents to make things for people. That was kind of his love language, was whatever it was that he was interested in making at the time, that's what he did. And so that ranged from, things as simple as like salsa, salsa was spectacular. It would be he would make these intricate wooden cutting boards. I mean, these things that are just beautiful. In fact, in some of the charity events that I've done over the years, I had to make these cutting boards, and they were some of the top-selling silent auction items. I mean, we could sell these cutting boards for like $200 for a charity, but he would make those for friends. But he would do these things where in his driveway, where he had all the like lathes and all this different equipment, where he would make these amazing ink pens, these custom-made ink pens out of these exotic woods that he would order from Africa or the Congo or Central America, wherever it might be. But he would make these custom-made the wooden pens that I would buy them from him and give them as gifts to people. What he was famous for were his olives, though. This is a guy that would drive 5.5 hours each way to go up, pick up raw olives, and then get 5-gallon buckets and cure them in his apartment for however long it took, and lye. I remember this because he would always tell me this. But it was lye, and which is drain cleaner. It's the only reason why I know is because he told me. But he would cure these and make these amazing olives, and those were kind of everybody's favorite. And so, people, my brother, my family members, they all wanted Bruce's olives, and he would always send enough. But the other funny one, though, which I would have never thought of, was he made wind chimes out of discarded scuba air tanks. Who knew? But you can take an air tank, cut it off in the middle, and turn it into a wind chime, which is like, only Bruce could figure out things like that.
What is your favorite memory or story about Bruce?
So, this one, there's a lot of great memories and stories, but this one ties into probably a sense of humor that most people didn't even know that Bruce had. But early on when we met, when he first came out to visit us in 1989, I mean, another example of his generosity, he came out, we had just gotten into our house, and he came out and took his vacation time and did landscaping for us. He literally did landscaping, like landscaped our whole front yard. That was how he spent his vacation. And but anyway, he came out and he saw in our house that we had probably unusually good pieces of art in our house for someone our age. And I mean, as it turns out, I had worked in a custom framing shop for an artist when I was in college. So even though the pay wasn't very good, I would get these 50% discounts on art and on framing. So I would take advantage of that, and I would buy things from artists that I knew. So we had really nice pieces of art, and he noticed that when he came out. So that was in 1989, and we had talked about that, and he went back home. And a couple months later, he called me one day, and he said, "Hey, I want to let you know that I found a really amazing piece of art. It's really more a sculpture." He said, "I noticed when you're out there you had this great art, but this is a sculpture, and I picked it up when I was down in Mexico." And he's like, "Don't worry, but I got a good price." But he's like, "It's a really nice piece of art." So he's like, "It's going to be a little while before I can get it to you because I need to get it insured, and I need to make sure that it's packaged well enough that it doesn't get broken in transit." And I was like, "Okay." And so he played this off for like several weeks. I mean, he kept calling me and saying, I'm still, waiting on the packing material. I got some custom packing material I want to use. And then it was like, I want to make sure. He played up the insurance angle. I got to make sure it's properly insured. And so people that knew Bruce early on would have known that he worked at Champion Products. So he was very skilled in packing things. I mean, it was one of the things he did that was like he was maddeningly meticulous about, was packing things to make sure that they never got broken. And so this package arrives finally after probably 3 weeks' time arrives. And so Diana and I, get it, and we get the box cutter, and we're cutting the thing open, and we're unpacking things, pulling out the plastic peanuts or whatever it was, all the packing material, and then there was another box, and we cut that one up, and we keep kind of like working our way down to this sculpture, and so the anticipation is building for this amazing sculpture, and then we finally get there, and this is what it was. This is what it was, and I don't know that we've ever laughed any harder, actually, and that was his wicked sense of humor. Monkey on a surfboard that I'm not sure everybody know about, but that's probably my favorite memory.